Every small town holds its secrets, but in Fairhaven, those secrets were supposed to be the quiet triumphs of community, the whispered blessings of a life well lived. Sarah Jenkins was the living embodiment of Fairhaven's perfect melody, a choir director whose voice lifted spirits, a neighbor whose smile brightened every street, a woman who seemed to embody everything pure and good. Her life, a symphony of dedication and kindness, played out against a backdrop of church steeples and tree-lined streets, a testament to the peace that could exist in a world striving for harmony. But on one unspeakable night, that melody was brutally silenced, replaced by a chilling discord that echoed through every home. How could a woman so universally adored, so deeply woven into the very fabric of her community, become the target of such an intimate, violent act? The immediate assumption was a random tragedy, a senseless violation that defied explanation. But Fairhaven was not a place for random acts, and Sarah Jenkins was not a woman without depths. As investigators peered closer, they found not just a murder, but a meticulously kept facade, and behind it a whisper of lives unknown. What hidden verses was Sarah Jenkins truly singing, and who in Fairhaven held the power to cut her song short forever? Fairhaven. The name itself evoked a gentle sigh from anyone who knew it, a postcard town where life unfolded with the steadfast rhythm of seasonal festivals and Sunday services. Every street seemed perpetually sun-dappled, every garden meticulously tended, a testament to a community content in its own quiet perfection. At its vibrant core stood Sarah Jenkins, the radiant choir director, whose voice lifted spirits, whose infectious energy was the town's undeniable pulse. 48 years old, with eyes that sparkled with an enduring kindness and a laugh that could chase away any shadow, Sarah was more than a local figure. She was Fairhaven's confidant, its unappointed mayor of merriment, its unwavering moral compass. To imagine violence touching her life was to imagine the very foundation of their peaceful existence crumbling. Then the static of illusion gave way to the sharp crackle of a 911 call. The dispatcher's voice, usually a calm anchor, sharpened with an unusual edge. 911, what is your emergency? A gasp, raw and ragged, tore through the line. Oh my God, it's Sarah. The voice broke, dissolving into a strangled sob, followed by a frantic clatter. Then, an ominous, drawn-out silence. It was 10:47 p.m., on a Tuesday, a time when Fairhaven usually settled into a deep, untroubled sleep. Tonight, a chilling new note had been struck, a sound that pierced the town's quiet confidence with the undeniable truth of an unthinkable rupture. Officer David Hayes, a man whose roots in Fairhaven ran as deep as the ancient oaks lining its streets, was the first to breach the domestic sanctity of Willow Creek Lane. The porch light cast a deceptive warmth, a cruel irony against the cold knot forming in his gut. The front door stood ajar, not forced, but quietly inviting, as if the owner had simply stepped out or been abruptly called away. The air inside, usually fragrant, with Sarah's signature lavender, now held a coppery tang of something irrevocably broken. His flashlight beam cut through the dimness, sweeping past framed photographs of Sarah, her husband Robert, and their daughter, Emily, all smiling, perfectly composed. But the illusion of domestic peace found its violent end in the living room. Sarah Jenkins lay there, an unholy disruption against the polished oak floor, the careful order of her world ripped asunder. A delicate antique music box, A cherished anniversary gift from Robert lay in pieces. Nearby, its intricate mechanism exposed an echoing symbol of a life violently unwound. The scene, despite its brutality, retained a disturbing intimacy, a violation that felt deeply personal. To Officer Hayes, it whispered not of random chance, but of a specific targeted fury, a strike against a woman who embodied the town's very essence. Quiet sanctity of Willow Creek Lane was soon overwhelmed by the strobing lights of patrol cars and the methodical movements of forensics teams. Neighbors, roused by the sudden commotion, emerged from their homes. Their faces illuminated by the harsh glare shifted from disbelief to a dawning collective terror. Whispers laced with fear and a profound sense of violation spread like a contagion through the cool night air. The brutal truth settled over Fairhaven. One of their own had been savagely murdered within her sanctuary. And with that revelation, the town's illusion of inviolable peace dissolved, leaving behind a chilling uncertainty. A shadow now stretched over Fairhaven, and the question was no longer if a killer walked among them, but who. The previous night's chilling discord had settled over Fairhaven, replacing its customary hum with an eerie quiet, broken only by the muffled sobs echoing behind closed doors. At the center of this raw new reality stood Robert Jenkins, Sarah's husband, an architect whose life had once been built on the solid bedrock of shared laughter and quiet understanding. Now that foundation had crumbled, leaving him adrift. In the sterile glare of the police station interview room, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles gleamed white, Robert struggled to articulate the chasm that had opened in his world. His voice, usually steady and resonant, was a raw rasp, catching with unshed tears. She was everything he managed, his gaze fixed on some distant, impossible point, my anchor, my compass. We had plans. Decades more of plans. He spoke of their early days, of Sarah's boundless energy, her singular gift for transforming ordinary moments into cherished memories, her absolute devotion to their family. His grief filled the room, a palpable weight, a silent testimony to a love violently severed. Their daughter, Emily, home abruptly from college, carried a different yet equally profound burden of sorrow. Her usual youthful vivacity had been extinguished, replaced by a vacant stare that spoke of a future brutally stolen. Mom wasn't just a person, Emily murmured, her voice thin, fragile. She was the person. She just vibrated with life. Every room she walked into, every conversation she joined it just got brighter. She had this way of making you feel like you were the only one who mattered, even if a dozen other people were around. Emily recounted cherished memories of Sarah's unwavering support, her infectious optimism, and how her mother had consistently been her fiercest champion, a constant, luminous presence in her life. It felt impossible. Emily conveyed that such a brilliant, life-affirming light could simply be extinguished. Beyond her immediate family, Sarah Jenkins was Fairhaven's public treasure. For 2 decades, as director of St. Jude's Church Choir, she had transformed a small local ensemble into a celebrated regional act, their harmonies frequently swelling through the town square at civic events and charitable fundraisers. Her dedication transcended mere musical instruction. She cultivated a tight-knit community, a surrogate family, where camaraderie was as important as pitch. Sarah was pure joy, recalled Margaret O'Connell, a soprano, whose eyes still brimmed with unshed tears. She could make anyone sing, even those of us who swore we couldn't carry a tune. Her laugh, it was just contagious. You couldn't stay sad around Sarah. Even Thomas Thorne, a charismatic newcomer to town and recent addition to the choir, echoed the sentiment, praising her rare spirit and unyielding grace. She was in the collective memory of her community, a woman who seemed incapable of generating ill will, a figure universally adored, whose presence elevated every corner of Fairhaven life. Indeed, Sarah Jenkins embodied more than just a musician. She was a foundational pillar of the community, her name synonymous with integrity and compassion. She served diligently on the board of the Fairhaven Historical Society, tirelessly advocating for the preservation of local heritage. She volunteered countless hours at the town's annual Harvest Festival, her organizational skills legendary. She mentored young artists and newcomers alike, extending a hand of friendship and guidance without expectation. Her public persona was one of seamless generosity, an open book of good deeds and unwavering civic pride. This intricate tapestry of her life, woven from threads of profound love, selfless service, and unyielding optimism, made the savagery of her end not just a personal tragedy for the Jenkins family, but a profound and shattering wound to the entire town. Fairhaven now faced an agonizing truth. The void left by Sarah Jenkins was not merely a missing voice in their choir, but a gaping, unfillable space in the very soul of their community, a testament to the unimaginable cost of her stolen life and the chilling enigma of why anyone would want to silence such a universally cherished presence. Fairhaven's perception of Sarah Jenkins, a woman of unblemished perfection, began to buckle under the relentless scrutiny of the investigators. The initial waves of raw grief that had blanketed the town slowly gave way to the methodical, insistent questions of detectives Miller and Chen. Each interview, each piece of collected data, subtly chipped away at the pristine image of Sarah, revealing whispers of a life more intricate than anyone had dared to imagine. Robert Jenkins, Sarah's devastated husband, remained a person of interest, a standard procedure in any homicide investigation. His alibi for the night of the murder appeared unshakable, a late-night project deadline at his architectural firm, meticulously confirmed by office security footage, and a junior associate who had worked alongside him until the early hours. Yet despite this robust corroboration, a subtle tension radiated from him. His politeness, once a natural extension of his character, now seemed strained, almost brittle, a carefully controlled defensiveness surfacing whenever his schedule or Sarah's habits were probed. Detective Miller observed Robert's hands clasped tightly, the subtle clenching of his jaw when discussing the final hours of his wife's life. It was a silent disconnect between his verbalized sorrow and the guarded flicker in his eyes. Robert wasn't just a man grieving, he seemed to be safeguarding a truth, or perhaps someone else's. His story, holds Miller stated to Chen later as they reviewed transcripts in their makeshift Fairhaven office. But he kept diverting, not lying exactly, but redirecting every line of inquiry about Sarah's routine, as if trying to steer us away from a particular path. Chen, ever analytical, highlighted a section. He readily offered details about his precise movements. But when it came to Sarah, it was always vague. She kept busy, always had something going on. Evasive rather than transparent. As the detectives broadened their interviews to Sarah's closest friends and fellow St. Jude's choir members, the picture of universal adoration initially presented so brightly began to shift. Margaret O'Connell, the soprano, who had earlier spoken so effusively of Sarah, grew visibly hesitant when asked about Sarah's schedule beyond choir rehearsals. Well, Sarah was quite independent, Margaret offered, her gaze drifting to the window. Always had her own engagements. Sometimes she'd be out quite late. She'd mention church business or historical society meetings. We never really pried. Her words, delivered with a nervous shrug, opened a hairline crack in Sarah's perfectly composed public facade. Another choir member, Susan Everett, echoed a similar sentiment. Sarah seemed a bit withdrawn recently, more quiet than her usual vibrant self. I assumed it was just the stress of planning the autumn gala for the Historical Society, but now her voice trailed off a nascent worry, clouding her features, hinting at an unspoken truth. These were not accusations, but rather subtle observations, glimpses of a less accessible Sarah Jenkins, a woman who occasionally operated outside the predictable rhythms of Fairhaven life. These late-night excursions, the omniscient narrator highlighted, were uncharacteristic for the usually home-focused Sarah, hinting at a divergence from her well-known public persona. When pressed on these mysterious engagements, those close to her offered only vague, almost protective answers, as if to shield her memory, or perhaps a deeper secret. It was Emily, in a moment of raw, unguarded grief, who provided the most telling detail. Mom had been really preoccupied lately, she confessed, twisting a tissue in her hands. Not sad exactly. More intense, like she was carrying a very heavy secret. I asked her once if everything was okay, and she just gave me that bright, dismissive smile and said, "Everything's fine, darling. Just a lot on my plate." But it wasn't the usual lot on her plate busy. It was different. She seemed almost burdened by it. Emily's poignant description of her mother's intensity and preoccupation offered a stark contrast to the effervescent, carefree image Fairhaven held so dear. It spoke of an internal struggle, a private world Sarah had carefully compartmentalized away from her harmonious public life. The detectives exchanged a knowing look. The public figure, Sarah Jenkins, was an open book of good deeds. But the private woman was proving to be an enigma, her carefully constructed harmony now revealing a muted, yet persistent undertone of discord. The initial certainty that Sarah had made no enemies began to dissolve, replaced by the unsettling possibility that she harbored secret activities, struggles, or relationships that had perhaps unknowingly placed her in mortal danger. Fairhaven's idyllic picture, once so clear, was now being overlaid with shifting shadows, hinting at hidden layers beneath its perfect surface. The labyrinth of confusing grief and unanswered questions surrounding Sarah Jenkins' murder suddenly yielded its first clear path, illuminated by Detective Laura Chen's relentless digital forensics. While Miller delved into the minutiae of Fairhaven's social circles, Chen remained cloistered in their makeshift office, a temporary fortress of screens and wires, methodically sifting through Sarah's digital footprint. It was a painstaking process, trawling through cloud backups, social media, and financial records, a digital archaeology of a life. Days blurred into nights, the cold glow of the monitor reflecting in her focused eyes, until a subtle anomaly finally surfaced, a hidden current beneath the placid surface. Deep within a forgotten folder, on Sarah's old laptop, encrypted and masked to appear as a mundane utility file, Chen uncovered a series of communications that shattered every illusion Fairhaven held dear. A burner phone linked to an untraceable prepaid account, and a set of heavily encrypted email accounts meticulously shielded from her public persona revealed a world Sarah Jenkins had painstakingly kept secret. These were not fleeting casual exchanges. The messages, raw with emotion and illicit longing, painted a vibrant, undeniable picture of a passionate, clandestine affair. It was a second life, meticulously hidden, a secret duet played in the shadows. The other half of this secret duet was Thomas Thorne, a charismatic consultant who had arrived in Fairhaven just over a year prior. Thorne had seamlessly woven himself into the town's social fabric. His easy charm and quick wit made him a popular figure, and he had even ironically joined the St. Jude's choir, his resonant baritone adding depth to the very harmonies Sarah directed. The discovered texts detailed secret rendezvous points, a secluded cabin outside town, late-night walks by Willow Creek, whispered conversations under the cloak of darkness. They were filled with declarations of love, frustration, and a desperate desire for a life that could not be. This was no casual dalliance. This was a deep, consuming secret that had been playing out right under the unsuspecting gaze of Fairhaven. The revelation struck Robert Jenkins with the force of a physical blow. When Miller and Chen delivered the news outlining the undeniable evidence of Sarah's infidelity, his grief, already a raw wound, transformed. The sorrow etched on his face twisted into a volatile cocktail of anger, humiliation, and profound betrayal. His eyes, already red-rimmed now, burned with a new furious light. He had lost his wife, but now the woman he thought he knew, the woman he had loved completely, was revealed to have lived a starkly different, deceitful life. The sanctity of their marriage, the quiet dignity of their family, all shattered by the brutal truth of a hidden affair. Thomas Thorne Miller announced, his voice clipped and precise as the pieces clicked chillingly into place. The charming newcomer, the man who sang in her choir. Chen laid out the printouts, a damning mosaic of dates and times, cross-referencing them with the witness statements of Sarah's late-night engagements and Emily's observation of her mother's preoccupation. Thorne's public facade, once so smooth and inviting, now appeared dangerously deceptive, a carefully constructed front for a profound secret. Fairhaven's esteemed choir director, its very moral compass, had been living a lie, and that lie had just placed a prime suspect squarely at the heart of her murder investigation. The question of who could hate Sarah Jenkins enough to kill her now had a very potent and very human answer: a betrayed husband, or perhaps a desperate, exposed lover. The case had just taken a dark, deeply personal turn, ripping away the last vestiges of Fairhaven's carefully maintained innocence. Thomas Thorne entered the precinct interview room with an air of refined sorrow, his composure meticulously maintained, a man perfectly calibrated for public sympathy. His suit was impeccable, his gaze direct yet subtly clouded with the grief expected of a recently bereaved lover. Seated across from Detectives Miller and Chen, he spoke with an articulate ease, his voice a smooth baritone that had charmed many in Fairhaven, including, it seemed, Sarah Jenkins herself. He presented himself as a soul deeply wounded by an unimaginable loss, ready to offer any insight, however painful. "Detective, this is simply beyond comprehension," Thorne began, his tone modulated with a controlled tremor. "Sarah was truly exceptional. My entire world has been irrevocably altered." He then launched into an exquisitely detailed narrative of his clandestine connection with Sarah, painting a picture of a profound, if illicit, bond. He spoke of their shared passion for music, their intellectual synergy, the magnetic pull that had drawn them together. He recounted their secret rendezvous, the careful measures they took to avoid detection, the bittersweet agony of their hidden love. "It was never our intention to cause pain," he insisted, his eyes holding Miller's. "We were just two people drawn together against all odds. We truly believed our secret was safe." Miller listened, allowing Thorne to elaborate, observing the subtle inflections in his voice, the carefully chosen vocabulary. He recognized the performance, the skillfully constructed narrative of heartbroken sincerity. "Mr. Thorne Miller," interjected softly, his voice, "even we acknowledge the depth of your relationship with Mrs. Jenkins. However, we must now focus on the night she died." Thorne's carefully cultivated poise fractured almost imperceptibly. He took a measured breath, his gaze momentarily distant. "That night, it was truly agonizing. Sarah and I had a difficult conversation earlier in the day. A disagreement about our future. I needed to clear my head. I drove out of town to the old scenic overlook, perhaps an hour west. I remained there for hours, just thinking. Alone. His alibi, he explained, was a solitary journey, a private emotional pilgrimage. No witnesses, no verifiable stops, just his solitary word spanning the critical dark hours. It was an explanation designed for plausible deniability, yet utterly unprovable. Detective Chen, quiet until now, interjected, her voice sharp and direct, cutting through the manufactured pathos. "You abruptly left Fairhaven the morning after Sarah's murder, Mr. Thorne, without notifying anyone, without even a 10-minute vigil for a woman you claim to love so deeply. Can you explain that sudden departure?" The question struck a nerve. Thorne's smooth composure evaporated. His shoulders stiffened, his jaw muscles clenched. "I was completely devastated," he stammered, his eyes darting between the two detectives. "In a state of shock. I couldn't bear to face anyone, especially not Robert or Emily. I needed to escape, process the grief in isolation. It was an impulsive reaction, not an admission of culpability." His tone shifted, losing its earlier mournful quality, now tinged with an undeniable rising defensiveness. Miller leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, deliberate register calibrated to apply psychological pressure. "Your phone records show no activity during the critical hours, Mr. Thorne. No calls, no texts. And your vehicle's GPS data is rather conveniently entirely absent for that period. A long, solitary drive with absolutely no digital trace. It almost seems too perfectly coincidental, wouldn't you say?" The unspoken accusation hung heavy in the air, a suffocating weight. Thorne's posture became rigid, his mask of empathy dissolving completely. "Are you implying an accusation, detective?" His voice hardened, edged with barely suppressed anger. "I am telling you precisely what transpired. Sarah and I kept our affair utterly discreet. Very few individuals even knew about it. Why would I commit such a heinous act against her, or risk exposing myself in the process? It defies all logic." He pushed back from the table, his gaze now openly defiant. "Perhaps someone else discovered your secret," Chen posited, her demeanor unyielding. "Someone you hadn't accounted for." "Perhaps," Thorne retorted, a sneer twisting his lips. "Perhaps Robert Jenkins discovered it. A betrayed husband, consumed by a furious rage. Or perhaps Sarah harbored other secrets, other enemies I knew nothing about. She was a complex woman, despite her public persona. I was merely her lover, not her keeper." He denied any involvement in Sarah's death, with growing vehemence, his smooth charm completely supplanted by an agitated defensiveness. He attempted to deflect, to sow seeds of doubt, to point the finger of suspicion back towards the grief-stricken husband, or towards the phantom of an unknown antagonist, anyone but himself. But his sudden disappearance, his vague alibi, and the undeniable reality of his clandestine life with Sarah Jenkins had squarely placed him in the crosshairs. The detectives saw not a grieving lover, but a man desperately attempting to conceal the truth, a man whose meticulously constructed facade was now crumbling under the intense, unforgiving light of their inquiry. The harmonious duet had ended in bloodshed, and Thomas Thorne was now left to perform a very discordant, very suspicious solo. The relentless spotlight, having pierced the illusion of Thomas Thorne's secret life, now swung backward, tracing his footsteps through a carefully constructed past. Released from the initial interrogation, Thorne maintained a facade of indignant innocence, yet detectives Miller and Chen knew his history, held the key, a hidden blueprint beneath the polished surface. If he was Sarah's killer, the truth lay buried in those forgotten chapters. Detective Chen, leveraging her sharp analytical mind and extensive digital forensics expertise, became the architect of Thorne's past. Her desk, a temporary landscape of pushpins, on maps, printed registries, and a constellation of browser tabs, chronicled his nomadic existence. What she unearthed was not a decisive weapon, but a disconcerting, almost predatory pattern. Thomas Thorne was a man of shifting allegiances and transient addresses, his journey marked from a quaint Vermont college town to a bustling North Carolina suburb. His path was a string of fleeting connections, unfulfilled promises, and minor financial evasions. A forgotten debt here, a skipped lease there, a vaguely defined consulting venture that simply evaporated. He consistently charmed his way and integrated swiftly, and then after a year or two departed, without a trace, leaving a quiet wake of disappointment and unresolved questions. "He's a professional charmer, Miller," Chen stated, her finger tracing a dotted line on a map. "A master at making initial connections, terrible at maintaining them. He cuts ties before obligations become too binding. Or too complicated." Miller nodded, the rhythmic tap of his pen against his notebook, reflecting a rising frustration. A man who avoids commitment. And potentially accountability. Despite this emerging profile of a serial deceiver, no direct, irrefutable evidence connected Thorne to Sarah's murder. Forensic analysis of the crime scene had yielded no prints matching his, no DNA, no fibers from his clothing. Beyond the undeniable fact of their secret affair, Thorne had left no physical trace of himself in Sarah's home. The murder weapon, presumed to be the blunt object causing the fatal trauma, remained stubbornly undiscovered. His alibi for the night of the murder, the solitary, unverified drive to a distant scenic overlook, while deeply suspicious, could not be definitively disproven. No one confirmed his presence there, yet no irrefutable proof denied it either. The digital void he had created around himself on that critical night, a deliberate disconnection, served as both a glaring red flag and an impenetrable shield. The initial surge of conviction against Thorne, fueled by the compelling motive of an affair on the verge of exposure, began to dissipate. It bled into a quiet, unsettling doubt. "We have a powerful motive," Miller Chen reiterated, her voice tinged with frustration. A man whose secret relationship was about to unravel, threatening his carefully constructed life. Perhaps Sarah was going to expose them, or perhaps he just couldn't bear the thought of being tied down permanently. "But we have nothing else," Concrete Miller countered, running a hand through his thinning hair. "No weapon, no physical evidence placing him at the scene when she died. His past paints a picture of a cad, even a liar, but not necessarily a killer. We can't build a case for conviction without more. This case grinds to a halt." He stared out the window at the picturesque Fairhaven, now seen through increasingly jaded eyes. A cold case. The words hung heavy, a bitter taste in the air. The procedural momentum, which had surged with the discovery of Sarah's affair, now faltered, bogged down in the exasperating absence of tangible proof. The detectives were left with a powerful emotional motive against Thomas Thorne, but the legal pillars required for justice remained maddeningly absent. This unsettling stalemate forced the team to confront a chilling possibility that their focus on the clandestine romance had blinded them to a deeper, more perilous truth. What if Sarah Jenkins' murder stemmed not from the passions of a secret lover, but from a hidden life far more dangerous, a quiet war waged in the very heart of Fairhaven, yet completely unknown to them? The echoes of Sarah's harmonious public life and her passionate private one were beginning to fade, replaced by the persistent, chilling question of what other, more profound secrets had Fairhaven's perfect choir director been keeping, and who, in this town of carefully guarded facades, would kill to protect them? The investigation into Sarah Jenkins' murder, once a frustrating puzzle, had slowly devolved into a gnawing uncertainty, threatening to join the ranks of Fairhaven's unspoken cold cases. Detectives Miller and Chen had meticulously pursued every thread related to Thomas Thorne, only to find themselves at a dead end, a void where conclusive evidence should have solidified their suspicions. The trail had gone quiet, the initial fervent pursuit replaced by a disheartening stalemate. Yet sometimes, in the quiet aftermath of tragedy, when all seems lost, unexpected revelations surface from the depths of personal grief. It was Emily, Sarah's daughter, navigating the agonizing task of dismantling her mother's life, who unwittingly uncovered a secret that would not only reignite the case, but expose a facet of Sarah Jenkins utterly unknown to her family and to Fairhaven itself. Among Sarah's meticulously organized sheet music nestled deep within the dusty drawer of an antique mahogany music stand, a treasured heirloom from Sarah's grandmother, Emily discovered a small leather-bound journal. Its pages were brittle with age, filled with an elegant, precise script distinct from her mother's usual hurried hand. Tucked beneath it lay a series of cryptic, typewritten notes, stapled together with an almost professional neatness. These were neither tender love letters nor mundane daily reminders. They represented a hidden language, a shadowed carol, humming softly of another existence entirely. The journal entries began subtly, almost cautiously detailing Sarah's increasing concern about discrepancies within the financial records of the Fairhaven Historical Society. This was no fleeting interest. The society stood as a revered pillar of the community, its mission dedicated to preserving local heritage. Sarah, a deeply committed board member, had poured countless hours into its work. However, her more recent entries revealed a growing unease and almost obsessive focus on the society's ledgers. April 12, the questioned Variance in Restoration Fund response was dismissive. Odd. Note to self-investigate further. May 3, RRD. Parcel 14B sale price appears significantly undervalued. Who authorized this? Pursue the paper trail. As Emily, a cold knot tightening in her stomach, delved deeper into the journal and the accompanying typed notes, riddled with names, dates, and account numbers that meant nothing to her, a chilling narrative began to emerge. Her mother, Fairhaven's beloved choir director, the very beacon of its community spirit, had been quietly, meticulously conducting her own clandestine investigation. Sarah's precise annotations detailed missing funds, suspiciously fast-tracked land rezoning approvals, and unaccounted-for donations, all pointing to a sophisticated, deep-seated local corruption scheme. What proved most unsettling was Sarah's belief that these illicit activities implicated several prominent, seemingly unimpeachable figures within the town. The journal, with its careful cross-references and methodical tracking, unveiled a righteous crusade, a quiet battle waged against the very individuals who personified Fairhaven's public trust. The revelation struck Emily with a profound disbelief. This was not the Sarah she knew, not the devoted wife, the loving mother, the charismatic choir director, nor even the secret lover. This was Sarah Jenkins, the uncompromising moral arbiter risking everything to expose hidden rot at the heart of her cherished community. Emily immediately brought her extraordinary discovery to detectives Miller and Chen, the weight of the old leather journal, a heavy symbolic burden in her hands. The shift in the investigation was both immediate and profound. Thomas Thorne, the scorned lover, was abruptly relegated to the periphery, his emotional motive dwarfed by the explosive implications of Sarah's findings. The possibility that Sarah's murder was directly linked to her unyielding pursuit of justice ripped through the previous theories with the force of a thunderclap. This was Sarah's third life, a persona of courageous defiance entirely distinct from her harmonious public role and her passionate private affair. It stood in stark contrast to everything anyone thought they knew about her, a shadowed carol playing a dangerous tune of deep-seated conspiracy. The detectives now understood with chilling clarity Sarah Jenkins had not simply harbored secrets. She'd been actively unearthing them, and in doing so had likely signed her own death warrant, not at the hands of a desperate lover, but at the hands of those who wielded power and feared the truth she carried. Fairhaven's true darkness was finally about to be exposed. The worn leather journal, now delivered by Emily Jenkins, didn't just reroute the investigation. It dramatically redefined its entire scope. Detectives Miller and Chen were pulled abruptly from the dead end of a lover's quarrel, thrust onto a path far more treacherous, leading deep into the bedrock of Fairhaven itself. The intimate betrayal of Sarah's affair, once a compelling motive, now faded into a minor chord against the swelling dissonant symphony of corruption Sarah had meticulously documented. Within days, Miller and Chen, aided by forensic accountants, began the painstaking work of deciphering Sarah's elegant script and cryptic cross-referenced notes. They weren't merely following the victim's last thoughts. They were retracing the precise, painstaking steps of an amateur investigator, a woman driven by an unyielding moral compass. Sarah's entries meticulously chronicled her growing unease, her initial subtle inquiries into the Fairhaven Historical Society's finances, evolving into a full-blown covert audit. June 1, Steck questioned Smithers' society treasurer on discrepancy in the Greenbelt Initiative donation. His evasiveness unsettling. Need to cross-reference with land permits. Another entry dated weeks later, June 15, the meeting with Mayor Vance regarding the Willow Creek zoning proposal. His arguments felt rehearsed, almost too smooth. The numbers don't add up for Parcel 17. Something is deeply wrong. Her methodical approach, typically reserved for complex musical scores, had been turned with chilling precision on the town's hidden ledgers. What the detectives painstakingly uncovered was a sophisticated local corruption scheme, a pervasive rot reaching into Fairhaven's most cherished institutions. It involved the systematic embezzlement of public funds earmarked for community projects and the illegal rezoning of prime real estate for private profit. At the dark heart of this web were two of Fairhaven's most revered and seemingly untouchable citizens, Mayor Jonathan Vance, a man whose public pronouncements on civic duty were legendary, and Arthur Blackburn, a wealthy real estate developer whose family name was synonymous with the town's prosperity. These men, outwardly pillars of the community, were orchestrating a silent plunder, their public benevolence, a cruel and calculated charade. Sarah, a woman whose core identity was truth and integrity, had become their unwitting nemesis. Driven by a profound, almost visceral commitment to Fairhaven, she had methodically gathered undeniable proof. Her journal overflowed with names, dates, photocopies of dubious documents she'd discreetly obtained, glaring inconsistencies in property deeds, and anonymous tips from concerned citizens she'd cultivated without ever revealing her own central role. She had constructed a damning case, painstakingly piecing together the intricate puzzle of their illicit activities. Sarah's courage, once expressed through the uplifting harmonies of her choir, had found a new, dangerous outlet in the pursuit of justice, transforming her into a solitary, relentless truth-seeker. Her fear, though hinted at in subtle, brief moments of hesitation, was consistently overshadowed by her fierce, unshakable resolve. Her final journal entry, penned mere hours before her death, delivered a chilling, urgent premonition. The words were bolder, more resolute than any before, imbued with a palpable sense of impending confrontation. July 24, the 9:00 p.m. tonight. I'm meeting Vance. I've gathered everything. The evidence is irrefutable. I can't let them destroy Fairhaven. It's time to go public. Her pen's strokes, usually so precise, now conveyed a desperate urgency, a final courageous act of defiance. This was no abstract plan. It was a definitive statement of intent, setting the stage for a dramatic, ultimately fatal encounter. The detectives realized, with a cold, sinking certainty, that Sarah had been murdered, not because of a passionate secret affair, but because she stood poised to expose a rot so deep it threatened to unravel the entire moral fabric of Fairhaven, directly implicating its most powerful figures. Her righteous crusade had tragically cost her everything. The meticulously compiled evidence from Sarah Jenkins' journal, painstakingly deciphered by detectives Miller and Chen, led not to the expected resolution of a passionate affair, but to a truth far more monstrous and profoundly shattering. It unmasked a betrayal that threatened to rip the very heart out of Fairhaven. The true killer was Mayor Jonathan Vance, a man publicly revered for his unwavering community leadership, a long-standing and respected member of St. Jude's Church. Vance had orchestrated the symphony of Fairhaven's civic life with an iron fist subtly concealed in a velvet glove. His involvement was not merely unexpected, it was an act of profound, almost biblical treachery. The revelation of his complicity hinged on a deceptively simple detail, an innocent thread woven into the fabric of daily life. Vance's wife, Eleanor herself, a devoted member of Sarah's choir and an active participant in the historical society, had, without malice or any inkling of danger, casually mentioned Sarah's peculiar interest in the society's finances. A passing comment over dinner, a fleeting observation about Sarah's unusual dedication to the ledgers, had been enough. For Jonathan Vance, a man whose carefully constructed empire of power and wealth rested precariously on those very pilfered funds, Eleanor's innocent remark detonated like a thunderclap. He instantly grasped the mortal danger Sarah posed to his meticulously crafted life, his career, and his illicit fortune. Fear, cold and absolute, seized him. The imminent exposure would spell not just public disgrace, but absolute ruin. On the night of Sarah Jenkins' murder, Jonathan Vance arrived at her home, not as an intruder, but as a trusted confidant, a pillar of the community, likely welcomed without a moment's hesitation. The journal's final resolute entry confirmed her intent. She had arranged to meet him, armed with irrefutable proof. What began as a desperate confrontation, a plea from Vance for Sarah to reconsider to keep silent, rapidly escalated. Sarah, anchored by her unwavering moral compass, refused to be swayed, her resolve hardening with every dismissive word Vance uttered. The gentle diplomatic mayor began a terrifying unraveling, his calm public persona dissolving under the immense, crushing pressure of impending exposure. The truth of that night, meticulously pieced together from forensic evidence and Sarah's final writings, revealed a scene of desperate violence. Vance's smooth fade cracked, exposing a raw, primal fear. Sarah, though physically smaller, fought with fierce determination, perhaps even attempting to hold onto the very journal that sealed his fate. The antique music box, a cherished symbol of domestic harmony, was swept from its perch, shattering on the polished oak floor, its delicate melodies silenced forever. In a moment of uncontrolled, terrifying fury, Vance seized a heavy decorative brass candlestick from the mantelpiece, the missing weapon Miller and Chen had fruitlessly searched for, and brought it down with brutal, unforgiving force. He struck her repeatedly in a frenzied, desperate attempt to silence her, to obliterate the truth she held, to preserve the life of lies he had so meticulously constructed. The woman who brought harmony to his choir, the woman who had trusted him implicitly, lay broken and bleeding, her righteous crusade violently ended by the hands of a man she had once admired. How many layers of deceit can a person build before their true self is utterly lost, forgotten, even by themselves? Jonathan Vance, the benevolent mayor, the devout church member, the respected community leader, all were carefully constructed facades behind which a monster of greed and desperation festered. The very man who publicly lauded Sarah, who stood beside her in the St. Jude's choir, whose voice blended perfectly with hers in weekly hymns of devotion, was the one who extinguished her life forever. He ensured her truth would never be heard in the way she intended. Fairhaven's deepest fear had not been realized by an unknown outsider, but by one of its own, a conductor of corruption, hidden in plain sight, who sacrificed an innocent life to maintain his dark symphony of lies. Armed with Sarah Jenkins' meticulously documented evidence and new forensic insights that chillingly linked Mayor Jonathan Vance directly to the crime scene, detectives Miller and Chen moved with an unwavering precision. The earliest rays of dawn were just painting the Fairhaven sky when unmarked police vehicles converged on Vance's elegant colonial home on Elm Street. The apprehension of a figure so deeply entwined in the community, a man whose public image was synonymous with unimpeachable integrity, was executed with quiet efficiency calculated to avoid public spectacle. Yet, the impact was destined to resonate profoundly. Vance, roused from his sleep, initially met the charges with a mask of bewildered indignation. "This is a preposterous error," he declared, his voice trembling with a carefully crafted outrage, "a gross miscarriage of justice." But beneath the practiced bravado, the flicker of dawning terror in his eyes betrayed him as he was led away. The news of Mayor Vance's arrest tore through Fairhaven like a violent squall, shattering any lingering illusions of its serene calm. The communal grief for Sarah Jenkins, which had slowly begun to heal, rapidly transmuted into a profound disillusionment then into a searing collective anger. The town wasn't merely mourning a loss. It was grappling with an unimaginable betrayal, a gnawing sensation of being deeply, cruelly deceived by one of its most trusted leaders. Whispers intensified into agitated shouts, and the meticulously maintained facade of small-town virtue crumbled, exposing raw, volatile emotions. Choir members who had sung under Sarah's direction and shared Sunday services with Vance now felt the very harmonies of their lives irrevocably broken, replaced by a bitter cacophony. Within the stark confines of the interrogation room, Mayor Vance initially clung to his defiant stance, an elaborate performance of outraged innocence. He brazenly dismissed Sarah's journal as the fabricated ramblings of a disturbed woman, a desperate attempt to malign his character. His composure, however, began to fray under Miller's relentless evidence-based pressure. Chen methodically laid out the indisputable fax bank records, detailing illicit transfers that perfectly mirrored Sarah's meticulous notes, land deeds bearing subtly forged signatures, timestamps of suspicious meetings that inconveniently coincided with Vance's meticulously recorded civic engagements. Miller, leaning forward, his gaze unyielding, then presented the newly re-examined forensic findings, a single-minute brass fiber, undeniably from the antique candlestick discovered embedded in Sarah's hand. An almost invisible clue, it now screamed Vance's undeniable presence at the scene. "This is entirely circumstantial, Detective Vance," snarled his voice, losing its polished veneer, a prominent vein throbbing visibly in his temple. A desperate, pathetic attempt to frame an innocent man. Then, with a quiet, devastating finality, Chen produced the ultimate piece of evidence, a testament to Sarah's profound courage and chilling foresight. Tucked away within the intricate, shattered mechanism of the music box, almost imperceptible to the naked eye, lay a tiny, expertly disguised pinhole camera. Sarah, acutely aware of the danger she faced, had anticipated the confrontation and recorded it. The retrieved footage, though, short, grainy, and silent, was irrefutable. It showed Vance, his face contorted in a mask of desperate rage, seizing the brass candlestick. It showed Sarah backing away, her eyes wide with horrifying realization. And then it depicted sickening final blows. Vance watched his face draining of all color, every last vestige of his carefully constructed lies dissolving into the stale air of the room. The performance finally collapsed. His shoulders slumped, his head falling into his hands in a gesture of utter defeat. His voice, now a broken whisper, confessed to the murder. His motive was laid bare, stripped of all pretense, the naked, consuming fear of exposure, the desperate, unhinged drive to preserve his corrupt empire, his entire fraudulent existence. She wouldn't stop. He mumbled his words thick with self-pity. She was going to destroy everything. With Vance's confession, the legal machinery of justice roared to life. The prosecution, spearheaded by a determined district attorney, swiftly commenced formal proceedings. Their case was meticulously crafted, not merely focusing on the act of murder, but powerfully connecting Sarah's tireless investigation into municipal corruption directly to her brutal death. It was a searing narrative of profound betrayal, not just of a wife by a husband or a lover by a lover, but of an entire community by its chosen leader. The impending trial would expose the deep-seated rot beneath Fairhaven's perfect veneer, stripping away the last comforting illusions of its small-town innocence. It would force its residents to confront the profound, festering darkness that had been hidden in plain sight. Justice For Sarah Jenkins, it was now chillingly clear, would exact a heavy price, not just from the perpetrator, but from the very soul of Fairhaven itself. The trial of Mayor Jonathan Vance became an undeniable national fixation, its harsh glare an unwelcome illumination on Fairhaven's shattered innocence. Every major news outlet descended upon Elm Street reporters, meticulously dissecting each piece of testimony, transforming the quiet local courthouse, once accustomed to zoning disputes and minor traffic infractions, into the crucible of a murder case that gripped the country. It served as a grim, unsettling testament evil could indeed thrive silently beneath the most esteemed and benevolent exteriors. The very bedrock of Fairhaven's cherished identity now faced an agonizing public reckoning. The prosecution, formidable with Sarah Jenkins' detailed journal, corroborating financial records, and the damning grainy footage from the music box's hidden camera, constructed an irrefutable case. Their presentation transcended a simple murder charge, evolving into a searing indictment of profound betrayal, systemic corruption, and the desperate ruthlessness a man would employ to shield his illicit empire. They unveiled Mayor Vance, not as Fairhaven's shepherd, but as its silent, calculating predator systematically siphoning its resources for private gain. The torrent of evidence exposed a sophisticated web of embezzlement, illegal land deals, orchestrated with Arthur Blackburn, and a chilling, brutal act of violence designed to permanently silence the singular voice brave enough to unveil it all. Robert Jenkins, Sarah's husband, approached the witness stand, his once composed demeanor now irrevocably marked by the dual burdens of grief and profound disillusionment. His voice, though hoarse, vibrated with an aching sincerity as he delivered his victim impact statement. "I don't just mourn my wife," he began, his gaze briefly searingly meeting Vance's, the fury he once felt having receded into a hollow, aching emptiness. "I mourn the life we built, the unwavering trust I placed in a community I believed was truly good. Sarah was the light, the truth in our lives, and that light was brutally extinguished by a man who feigned friendship, who posed as our leader. That trust, it is utterly gone. For me, for Emily, and for all of us here." He recounted quiet evenings, shared dreams, the simple joys that Vance's greed had so callously stolen, painting a vivid, heart-rending portrait of the profound personal cost of the mayor's actions. The raw agony of violated trust resonated in every strained word, a testament to his enduring loss, not just of Sarah, but of the very essence of Fairhaven he had cherished. Then Emily stepped forward, her youthful face still shadowed by profound sorrow, hardened with quiet resolve as she faced the court. Her voice, initially trembling, gained unwavering strength with each word. "My mother was larger than life," Emily declared, eyes locking onto Vance, who sat impassive, a blank mask of denial. "She believed in justice, in doing what was right even when it was difficult. She fought for this town, for its very integrity, and you, Mayor Vance, you brutally stole her from us because of it." Her voice momentarily broke, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek before she continued firm. "You didn't just murder my mother, you attempted to murder the truth. You stole her future, my future with her, all to protect your own elaborate lies. And for that, there can be no forgiveness." Her words, direct and accusatory, resonated through the hushed courtroom, a searing testament to the perpetrator's enduring human toll. Vance, for a fleeting instant, seemed to flinch, a sliver of something akin to shame, or perhaps true fear, briefly piercing his controlled facade. After weeks of grueling testimony, expert witnesses detailing forensic findings, and labyrinthine financial illicit dealings, and the grim playback of Sarah's final courageous moments, the jury returned their verdict. The single word guilty reverberated through the courtroom, a final, definitive stroke of justice. For Robert and Emily, it offered a measure of profound relief, a validation of Sarah's ultimate sacrifice, yet it could not fully mend the gaping wound in Fairhaven's collective spirit. Vance, finally stripped of his meticulously constructed lies, allowed only a flicker of disingenuous, almost performative regret to cross his face before it settled into a cold, hardened mask of defiant denial. In the aftermath, Fairhaven grappled with a devastating new reality. The loss of Sarah Jenkins remained a raw wound, deepened by the searing betrayal of their elected leader. The town's illusions of inherent goodness, its cherished belief in unblemished virtue, were irrevocably splintered. The old harmony of the saint, Jude's choir, once a powerful symbol of unity, now resonated with an uneasy, resonant silence, a perpetual reminder of the insidious discord that had festered just beneath the surface. Friends exchanged wary glances. Neighbors questioned the very fabric of their shared trust. The charm of Fairhaven, once its defining asset, now felt like a fragile, fractured mirror. Yet amidst this profound disillusionment, the Jenkins family embarked on their arduous, uneven journey toward healing. Robert, initially consumed by an all-encompassing grief and anger, discovered a new purpose in honoring Sarah's legacy, establishing the Sarah Jenkins Integrity Fund to support local investigative journalism. Emily, though irrevocably changed, channeled her pain into a potent advocacy, vowing to continue her mother's fight for transparency. While Sarah's vibrant melodies had been brutally silenced, the profound echoes of her bravery, her unwavering commitment to truth, persisted, rippling through Fairhaven and beyond. Her story stood as a solemn, enduring testament to the deceptive nature of appearances, the corrosive power of hidden corruption, and the tenacious, often costly human spirit that relentlessly pursues justice. Fairhaven, irrevocably scarred, but perhaps finally wiser, was left to begin the slow, difficult process of rebuilding, knowing now that genuine harmony can only truly flourish atop the unyielding bedrock of truth, no matter how painful its excavation. In Fairhaven, the search for harmony revealed that true peace demands an unyielding truth, no matter the cost of its song. If stories of hidden truths and the complex pursuit of justice in quiet towns resonate with you, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the shadows. Don't forget to subscribe to Shadow Files and hit the notification bell.